Okay, so I'm just going to do one of the questions from each of the worksheets I gave out. Start with number 2. That's the one a lot more people had questions about. Okay, so whenever we're dividing polynomials, the idea is going to be the same. You're following the same steps: divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down. Does McDonald's sell burgers? Answer is yes, of course. Okay, and now let's look right over here. Our first question. Your first polynomial, that's going to be the dividend. That's always going to be inside this house right over here. And your second polynomial, that's going to be the divisor, and that's going to be outside. Now, in our first step, divide, we're going to divide the first term. The first term of the dividend divided by the first term of the divisor. So here we are, we're doing 3x squared divided by x. Now remember, whenever we are dividing exponents, we're subtracting the powers. So this would look like, let me write down here, x, so the 2 from here minus the 1 right from there. And then 3 divided by 1, because I don't have a coefficient there, we automatically assume it is 1. So you're doing 3 divided by 1, and that's just 3. Now we have to simplify. So if we do 2 minus 1, we're just left with 3x to the first power. We can write the first power, but usually we just keep it as plain x. Now I'm going to write this and put it right over its common term, which is right over here. Now my second step is I have to multiply. So what I mean by multiply is I'm going to be multiplying this 3x by the divisor, x minus 5. It's always going to be that divisor. It isn't going to be the dividend. It's always this. Whenever we're multiplying, it's whatever we got on top multiplied by that divisor. And then we want to distribute everything. So you're doing 3x times x. That's going to be 3x squared. Notice how when we're multiplying exponents with the powers, we're actually adding them. And then when we do 3x times negative 5, it's going to be negative 15x. Right? So this is what we're going to write underneath. And notice how I'm putting all my like terms underneath each other. That's going to help me when I go to my third step, which is to subtract. So here I am, I'm going to subtract them. This is negative 14x. So let me write my work over here. Negative 14x minus negative 15x. So when you have a minus negative, these two minuses, they become a plus, because remember, negative times negative is a positive. So you have a negative 14x plus 15x. Now when you add these two together, it's just going to give you a positive 1x, because 15 is the bigger number. So we're going to write down x. I could write that 1, but you know, this is the same thing as saying 1x. It's redundant. 3x squared minus 3x squared, that cancels out. That becomes a 0, and we're good. And now we're going to go to our fourth step, which is to bring down. So I'm going to bring down the next term for my polynomial, which is that negative 5. And from here, it's going to be the same steps again. So we're going to do all the steps that we start off with. We're going to do it again for this down here. So like before, you want to go ahead and divide. So I'm going to divide the first terms from each other. So I'm going to be doing x divided by x. Now keep in mind, the one on top is always going to be whatever's in the house. Let me write that in green, just to show you I'm taking that x. I'm taking that x from the dividend. Whoops. So x divided by x, this is the same as saying x to the 1 minus 1 power, which is the same as saying x to the 0. And x to the 0 power, it's just going to be 1. No matter what number you're going to use or what letter you use for your variable, anything to the power of 0 is equal automatically to 1. So this one, it's a positive one. I'm going to put a positive 1 right over here. Now we're going to move to our second step, which is to multiply. And remember, we are multiplying this, whatever we got on top, times a divisor. It's always going to be to that divisor. So you're going to do 1 times x minus 5. Now, we know that anything times 1 is itself. So even if I distributed this, right, 1 times x, I'm still going to get x. 1 times negative 5, I'm still going to get negative 5. So this one I could write underneath. And then I could go on to my third step, which is to subtract. So I'm going to subtract these two. This one, let me write my work over here. It's going to be negative 5 minus negative 5. And remember, we have those two negatives, two negatives down here. So this will turn into a positive 5. So what we're actually doing is negative 5 plus 5, which just gives you 0. So this cancels out. And then we have an x minus x. Oops. X minus x, it's minusing itself, that's also a 0. So for us, in this answer, we don't have a remainder, and we are good to go. This will be your answer to the first one. Okay, so it doesn't matter if your polynomial in the divisor has 2, 3, 4, 6 terms. It's always going to be the same steps: divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down.